Welcome to the
Nice.
Fam Podcast, the show where we interview the creators shaping our cultural landscape today. On this episode, we welcome an artist who has emerged as a key voice in the new disco dance scene. Pink Flamingo Rhythm Review is the solo project of Eric Mendelsohn, described by Mixmag as a modern classic in waiting. With a funky, tongue-in-cheek vibe, his music explores themes of vice, ego, and heartbreak through tragic characters who can't help but get in their own way. Since releasing his debut self-titled EP in 2018, he's collaborated with dance music heavyweights like Yuksek, Severino, Jantanique, and many more. Please welcome Eric Mendelsohn of Pink Flamingo Rhythm Review. How's it going, man? Great to have you back.
It's going great. I'm happy to be here, man.
Yeah, you played here a few months ago, and what's so great was, your music is dancey and produced and can be DJ'd. But when you guys actually played here, you played as a three-piece. Well, really, you were a solo guitarist with two singers harmonizing. I think, what I appreciate most in music is music that can transcend formats, and the fact that you were able to take your songs, because I think at the heart of Pink Flamingo Rhythm Review is songwriting, but dress it up in a completely different way was pretty awesome to see. And so I'm curious just how you think about your music as not just disco bangers, but as songs as well.
Yeah, that's a interesting question. I think that, to be honest, I don't think I ever think about my music in any way outside of the song being the
Mm.
sort of central core. For me, it's really like song, like the meat and potatoes of the song has to like shine for me to be excited. Like I generally don't like, maybe I'll produce like a rhythm section first, but I generally like need to write the song before I produce out the vibe. And then maybe it coincides and I'll have an idea for like a type of song or a
Mhm.
vibe of song. But yeah, I think songwriting is pretty essential to me. It's sort of like the home base.
Yeah. Your music has been described as being extremely danceable while carrying these like deeper narratives. Was that intentional from the beginning in terms of your lyricism, or was that something that naturally developed as you started this project?
I think that the depth, I think the songs are always going to be a little bit therapeutic and a little bit autobiographical. So like, a lot of my songs, I guess through the lens of other characters, I think I play dress up a lot with different character identities in my songs, but like the notions of these characters per se are feelings and experiences that I can relate to or have had. So I think that it's always a little bit about like exercising some kind of demon or like airing some type of fear or some type of emotional catharsis, even if it's like describing a story, even if it's something funny, there's some type of like greater narrative to the type of person or the type of situations going on in the tracks. So I think that like that is just like, it's therapy, and for me it's like a fun thing to sink my teeth into, and it's like a little bit like, you know it's also kind of aligned, I think, with influences. Like I really identify with a lot of artists in the past that write that way. So I think that that's sort of like a fun opportunity for me to sort of put on that hat and like write stories that are sort of about characters with some type of depth or some type of problem or some type of behavior that's representational of their shortcomings.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
It's interesting to hear you talk so much about the songwriting, like pulling back the lens a little bit to some of your earliest influences. Were you always a songwriter? Was that your entry point, if you will, into music? Was it through songwriting, or was it through guitar? Was it through instruments, like through production?
Yeah, it was definitely initially through guitar. I like started on guitar when I was 7, so that was like definitely my entry point, and very much the thing I aspired to was like the guitar hero kind of thing as a little kid. I was really into the classic rock stuff and
Yeah.
the classic guys in that world. So that really resonated with me as a kid. And then pretty soon I got into songwriting, but it wasn't like I ever aspired to be a songwriter. I think it was just like, I'm in a band. We need songs. Like
Mm,
I can write something. I can like come up with something. And then it just kind of happened. Um, and it was sort of a very instinctual thing. It wasn't like I sat down as a young kid and was like, I need to write. I like need to write some like deep song. As a kid, it was mostly like, I'm in a band, so we're gonna write some songs. Like,
yeah.
yeah, that was that was kind of it. Kind of it.
You're a solo producer now, but you always sort of played in bands
Mm-hmm.
growing up.
Yeah, yeah.
What were some of like the bands that you were in, leading into Pink Flamingo Rhythm Review?
Many. I mean, it goes back to when I was like, I feel like I was in my first band. I think I was 9 years old,
Nice.
something around that time period. But high school, once middle school hit, I started playing with friends, and I like had a proper band by the time high school hit. And we were a metal band in Jersey, and we were doing that
Yeah.
Jersey thing, and then that evolved, and I joined a couple other different bands and went through the sort of emo pop punk era in Jersey in like the late 90s, early aughts. And through that experience in those bands, I found my way through the community, meeting some other people, and got a call from a friend that uh, a band in New York needed a guitar player. And I tried out. This is when I was like 20 or 21 years old. I tried out for this band in New York, and I got in the band, and then all of a sudden I was playing in a band in New York, and that was sort of like I jumped the river. I like
Yeah,
made
yeah.
it from Jersey to New York, and then I was in bands in New York, and collaborated with particularly one guy who I'm still friends with for many years. He and I were in a couple bands together. First band was called TVTV, and we were like a kind of late aughts, kind of like Lower East Side indie rock mixed with a little bit of pop and pop punk kind of stuff. And then that evolved into that wasn't really where we were at musically, and eventually we evolved out of that, and that band evolved into another band called Ghost Beach, and that band was my focus from about 2010, 2011 through about 2015. And that band was an electronic kind of produce, once again, really song focused, but like an electronic produced sort of and synthy um, band that was super big part of my life at that time. And then from that point, 2015, that band sort of dissolved, and I started dreaming up doing a solo thing around 2015. And so I've sort of been playing under the moniker of Pink Flamingo Rhythm Review now, I guess now for 10 years, which is
Wow.
wild. But
Congrats.
yeah, that sort of was the seed of the idea to do the solo thing. And the thing is also coinciding and simultaneously to those bands, I was always in lots of projects. I've always been
Mm,
someone who has played with a lot of different people, played with friends. I might like do like a hired gig. I might do like, sideman stuff. So that was always happening also.
yeah.
But these bands were like my focus.
Yeah. When you're playing in so many bands, you're picking up all these different influences. And I think what's interesting about your background and backstory is that you've been able to, slide through so many genres, if you will.
Mhm.
And now with Pink Flamingo Rhythm Review, you've sort of coalesced around a sound that's very uniquely yours, but also very different than, Ghost Speech and other bands that you've played. I mean, I'm very familiar with Ghost Speech,
Mm-hmm.
which, hearing the story now, it makes total sense that was sort of like your first foray into like produced synthy music that would lead to, the
Mm-hmm.
productions you're doing now. I'm sort of curious, from playing with so many bands and picking up so many influences, how you've taken all those influences and transmuted it into this cohesive sound. Like, how did you arrive at this sound for this project?
I mean, that's a lifetime of stuff. I think that I think if there's one thing I can say about myself is that I really am a freaking music nerd. I really love a lot of music and I get really into why I dig it. It has never been like, I mean, I think in the creation process, it's very instinctual for me, but in terms of like why I like something, I can get pretty nerdy about it. So that's to say that by the time I was like considering doing my own stuff, I was sort of thinking about the great R&B that I loved as a kid that I never really got to play because that's just not the scenes I was in. Like,
Hmm.
you know, Jersey emo metal
Right,
stuff
exactly.
in like 2002.
Yeah, and Pink Flamingo Rhythm Review is not necessarily pulling from, emo.
Not at all. Not, and at that time that was an interesting like identity to put on because it wasn't necessarily I was not the kid who was like obsessed with Blink 182 in like 1998 and I was like, "Oh my god, I want to do a pop punk band." I just was friends with those kids like and I liked that stuff too and I got into the songwriting and the band and the guitar playing stuff around that and very much fit into it. But it wasn't ever like that was like my thing. I just like was like into playing music and that was what was happening. So I was doing that.
Yeah.
And so I think by the time I got to doing my own music, it was like I loved as a kid, I loved disco. I loved like and like not casually, like I was obsessed with Chic records and I was like obsessed with the production and like the songwriting approach from Gap Band and Chic and James Brown, like the entire James Brown catalog and like Parliament Funkadelic. And that was like I grew up on that stuff, but just was like doing it by myself in my little like and with like a couple other friends that I grew up with, but it wasn't something that I ever like felt like I had access to performing or like calling on as a writer or performer. Also, partially because, and maybe this goes into the evolution with getting into electronic and electronically produced and synthesized music, was that experience with getting into that music gave me a palette to create some of the lushness and some of the bigness of productions that were more akin to the classic dance, R&B, funk, disco stuff that I was into. Whereas as a younger person in a rock band, like you can't really believably recreate that with a bass, drums, guitar rock band. So like going through the experience with Ghost Speech and getting into synth production and synthesis and production in general gave me sort of the palette to build upon by the time that I got to doing my own stuff. So I felt like I could make like bigger productions and call on that and also call on some of the rock stuff because a part of the Pink Flamingo thing is there's Elton John in there. You know, there's like bands in a way. There's 70s rock elements mixed in with funk, disco, R&B, dance music. It's kind of in my head at least. It's kind of blended together,
And that's what makes it unique, right? And
yeah.
I think that's what gives it its signature sound. There's plenty of new disco.
Mm-hmm.
There's plenty of disco sounding dance music, but nothing that comes to mind, at least, that blends the elements of the 70s rock influence songwriting
Mm-hmm.
that you are able to deconstruct into a three-piece acoustic performance, for example,
Mm-hmm.
while working for a dance floor. And I think that's what makes your sound so unique. As you approach year 10 as a
Mm-hmm.
solo artist, which is,
Mm-hmm.
such a great milestone. How do you see your sound, or where do you want to evolve it from where you started it?
Um, that's a good question. I think that I have a lot of music that is gonna come out, hopefully. Trying. It's gonna come out hope maybe this year. I mean, I have almost a whole record
That's the eternal struggle, right?
of new stuff. Um that when I peel back a little bit and listen to it um with some distance, it's interesting. It has I don't think that I often sit down and think I'm going to evolve my sound. I think I'm always chasing some type of vibe or some type of writing thing that I want to sort of like play with. And especially I get into stuff that I think is like, I almost have this like aggressive tilt where I'm like, this is not like, this is not like an R&B song, and this is kind of a weird thing, and I'm just going to go for it. Fuck it. So I have a little bit of like a fuck it attitude sometimes with songs. And I think that some of the stuff that's forthcoming has a little bit of that. That's maybe how the tongue in cheek thing sort of manifests, is like, I think I performed it here. I have this song that's like about going to brunch. It's not it's not like just about going to brunch. It's sort of a world where you're engaged with a character who is the kind of character that does this sort of wacky thing with their friends and goes to brunch, and they're going to some weird place. And it sort of puts you in a world where like maybe you have an idea of who this character could be. It's pushing into that stuff. It's getting a little more fringy, maybe, in terms of stuff that like that I'm into doing now. And then like also like, I don't know, I just feel like getting more like effortless grooves, trying to loosen the grip a little bit on the production tightness and getting a little more organic with certain songs. I have one song that I'm trying to get out that's like an unabashed 90s style ballad. And I'm just like, once again, fuck it. Like I want to do a like fucking Casey and JoJo ass fucking 90s ballad.
Love it.
Like, that's sort of where I'm wanting, and I think I have already in the songs that are coming have sort of gone for the next round.
Dude, that's so exciting. When can we hear this?
Oh my gosh. Well, a lot of it is pretty close. I'm still like sort of working on mix stuff. But with any luck, before the end of the year, I'll get some stuff out. So,
dude, well, we can't wait. Thank you again so much for performing at at our FAM, and hopefully we'll have you again when the new record comes out.
Oh yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, thanks, Eric.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it, man.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
This is super fun.
Cheers.
Super cool.